I grew up as a pastor's family. So my grandparents were pastors of a church, and my mom was the worship leader, and her brother was the teaching pastor. And the person who abused me was my mom's brother's son, so my uncle's son, my cousin. And so there were a lot of like church league softball games and football games and blah, blah, blah that we did. And when I got abused, it was during a softball game where all of the adults were obviously playing in the game. And my 16-year-old cousin took me when I was like, I think I was 11, between 9 and 11 based on the Game Boy Color coming out. And he was like, do you want to play this Game Boy Color? So like he was luring me with this Game Boy Color that I really wanted to play, and my parents couldn't afford it, and he had one, so I was like, sure. And he took me in the back of his dad's car and like said that he would only give it to me if he would like let me do whatever he wanted to do. So all I remember is that while he was assaulting me, I literally was playing the Game Boy Color. So even when I was driving here, I was thinking of the way that affected me, and you can see that, I would say, throughout my teenage years of like just distraction to kind of like not even think about what was happening. And have you ever read The Body Keeps the Score? No. Okay. So you would love it. I'm sure you're going to read it at some point. But it talks about how like abuse obviously affects the body, and like your body will keep the score even if you don't want to like address whatever has happened or if you're not capable of it. And so there was one study that was done of adolescents who were 11 years old, because that's actually a common time for people to get sexually abused. And they took a survey of this 11-year-old group who had been abused and this 11-year-old group who hadn't been abused, and asked them all the same questions, and all of the answers were like basically the same. But then as years went by, the 11-year-olds who had not been abused like kind of were able to process like difficult things in high school, in relationships and everything, but then the ones who had been abused just numbed, and like they diminished all of their issues. So by the time they got to college, it was like me, where I was like, I don't have any problems, like everything's great. So I would say that like that visual of like me sitting there playing the Game Boy Color like just defined my whole high school years then, middle and high school years, of me just sitting there being like, not gonna pay attention to what's happening, I'm just gonna kind of like distract myself. And I would say that was probably the biggest effect on me until I got to high school, and I just started like exploring more like sexuality, but like not with actual people, because I think I was so afraid of like the intimacy that would be required with that. The closeness, it's so true. And so this is like right when chat rooms were becoming a thing, and like all of us got our first computers at home, and our parents didn't know at that time that they shouldn't have given us computers because they was so new. Yes, now they know. But like we all had like our own computers like downstairs, and like nothing was being monitored. And one of my friends was like, have you ever heard of chat rooms? And so like I remember my friend Emily showed me a chat room for the first time, and of course there were all of these like creepy men preying on girls. So like I just remember like all of those visuals then caused me to want to explore like pornography, which then turns into masturbation, which then turns into all sorts of like horrible unhealthy addictions that I had until I was like from the ages of probably like 13 until like 19. Yeah. So from an addiction standpoint, I feel like that was the way that I most manifested being abused. And then also with food, because like the distraction aspect. So like I wanted the intimacy, I wanted to like know what that sexual feeling was. So that's, I think, where the porn and the masturbation and all that stuff came from. But then I also like hated myself for like ever doing all of that. So then I would numb with food. So like at night after like doing all of these things, I would like run upstairs to the kitchen and like eat a huge thing of chocolate chips and peanut butter, like just to like binge eat. And then whenever I got to college, or my senior year of high school, I like then was like, I hate that I'm fat. So then I was like, I'm not gonna eat anymore. So then I stopped eating in general. So it was just these huge marks of extremes. Like of like binge eating, stop eating altogether, like throwing up my food, and then like eating even more, and just like huge ups and downs. And so I like didn't feel like a stable person until I was like 24, and I'm 26. So like the last 2 years, I feel like I'm like so like emotionally stable and healthy and like, you know, good. However, like I don't even think I realized at the time that like that abuse really set me off to just be like. So everything's pretty spotty. I will say he did it to me multiple times, but that is the only time I can remember when it happened. I remember too another time after the fact, like after he had abused me another time, I remember going into his bathroom and locking the door and crying. And so I remember certain flashbacks, but I still don't remember. Like I honestly don't even remember that whole year.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I definitely like numbed it. But I did tell my parents after the bathroom incident, which is why I remember it. And I would say my parents were the ones that were in denial.
Really?
Yes. So my mom basically was like, I'll talk to, you know, her brother, like I'll talk to your uncle about it. But like I never heard of anything after that. So like we never talked about it again until I brought it up when I was in 2012.
Okay.
So after like 11 years, we never talked about it. My brother was abused by the same person, and no one knew until I came out in 2012 and said something. And then when I said something in 2012 and just was basically like, I need help, I need to go to therapy because I was starting to have flashbacks and stuff, my brother came out and said he was abused by the same person, and 2 of my cousins said that they were abused by the same person. And no one had said a thing.
No one said anything. Did you feel better knowing that like you weren't alone kind of in that? Or did it make you feel worse that like these people that you loved so much were also abused and taken advantage of?
With my cousins, I think I just felt better because I felt like they were like freed from this thing that they were holding on to, especially one of them was about to get married and had never told her future husband.
Were they both girls?
Yes. But then obviously and who knows, he's probably, I don't even know how many people he's probably done this to, but with my brother, I experienced like a ton of guilt and shame because my brother knew that it happened to me, and he had started experiencing like flashbacks when he was like 17 or 18, but he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want me to remember if I hadn't remembered. So he was like trying to protect me in a weird way. So I like felt horrible about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a lot of pressure.
it was brutal. Yeah, he was carrying a lot of pressure for sure. At first, my grandparents and everyone actually said that Zachary, my brother, and I were lying, and basically took my uncle and his son's side and was like, you guys are making a big deal out of this, whatever. And because of that, my mom didn't talk to her parents or her brother for like 3 years. I know, because they were just like very like spiritually abusive and said like that we were all like gonna go to hell and stuff, which is crazy. And then like last year was the first time that my mom actually talked to her brother. It's like literally my mother's entire family live in denial, like 135% denial. They can't, no. But it's sad because then you like see how it plays out in their lives, like loneliness and like no relationships, no friends. Yeah, and like I definitely think that getting married obviously brings all of that up. And I had a huge fear of sex for sure. And I'm guessing that's all related. Like I don't think I've ever traced it back, but it's not hard. And I think that just like shame in general about my physical body, that I just thought that there was like something wrong with like me, or that Todd, my husband, like wouldn't be like happy with me, and like just lots of like shame surrounding that. So like, yeah, I definitely think that I can't say that it's like a daily thing now or anything like that, but I will say like things trigger it. So like with the whole like Larry Nassar case or whatever. So like when I like read things like that, which I'm super interested in because of like the justice aspect of it and it's healing in some sense, I definitely get very heightened. And if Todd like hugs me, I'm like off. So it's like definitely personal still. Yeah. So I would say physically in that way. And then emotionally, I think I definitely feel more traumatized and still work through the most, like the fact that it was allowed to happen. Like, so I think that a lot of it for me is like I told my parents and like nothing happened. And my grandparents wanted to defend it and like all under the name, because at that point they had like a really big church and they didn't want it to like ruin the reputation. So like that for me has still been like the echoes that I hear and the stuff that I have to work through. Because I have personally been inside of that and then also was a victim to it, I am like very, very distrusting of probably good people. Because of like, there's just this thing in me where I almost feel like I can't fully let my guard down because then something horrible is gonna happen again. I do often feel that if something happened and I were the only one that knew about it, that my word wouldn't be taken seriously.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that would ever be the case. It's like some fake story in my head, but yeah. But like if something serious were to happen or if I thought something was serious, yes, exactly. It was reinforced from the time that I was a kid, which was like, we'll take care of it, but then they never did, but like never talk about it again. Right. So yes, I was definitely like, I never dated anyone until like I was 22 or something like that. And so I definitely internalized and definitely isolated, but also so much. Is it called ambivalence, where you're like wanting to be seen, but no, also you don't want anyone to see you? So that's what I think all of it was for me, was like I was wanting to know what the intimacy felt like, but I didn't want it to be with anyone because I was too afraid. Yeah. So then I just kind of like turned into an island, but I had so many friends. Yeah. But like I didn't really know any of them, or at least none of them really knew me.
Really?
Yeah.
So you wanted that closeness, like bodily, but not emotionally.
It is so true. Yes. I wanted to be surrounded by like 7,000 people, but like none of them could ask me a serious question. Yes. I didn't ever think about it when I was a teenager. The first time I remember thinking about it, well, I guess I did when I was 17, because they had like a sex talk at my high school. And they were like, I don't know, you've probably read this before if you've read anything that I've written, but this like lady came up and like took this like rose and like passed around the whole auditorium, the whole thing, and was like, if you give yourself away like all these petals, then like you're gonna turn into this like battered rose. And she started talking about like all of these like, she talked about like porn and all of that, but obviously was addressing it towards the guys, which then made me feel even more like isolated. Yeah. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like I'm like totally damaged. Like I've done all of this horrible stuff and blah, blah, blah. So that was the first time I even remember remembering it.
Yeah.
And then do I view it differently now? 100% differently, yes. I actually really loved, did you read what that Rachel, what's her last name? The girl who first accused Larry Nassar.
I haven't read it, but I've like seen it floated around.
So it was like she verbalized like the place that I've come to when it comes to it, where hopefully the place that I've come to it, which is like desiring justice, but also mercy even for him. And like, I think something God's been teaching me for the last couple of years is that he's angry about it too. Like, I don't think he was sitting there being like, this is fine. Like, that's just not who he is. And so I think it was good for me to be so angry for 3 years. I was just so mad. I was mad at him. I was mad at everyone in my family. And I was just frustrated that no one listened to me. And then just choosing to forgive him and like taking that control back and not giving him the control of how my life was going to go or even my family, but just saying like, God has given me the dignity of causality. Like I can choose to take a step forward, and like just taking that back by forgiving and releasing everyone, which obviously didn't happen in a second, but like, and I'm still walking through it. But 2 years later, I feel empathy for him, that he was so hurt and wounded, and who knows, like, I don't know what happened to him. I'm sure something did, that he lashed out.
Yeah.
And once again, it's not in a way that excuses anything, but it's just like he was hurt and he did that. Because like God doesn't create people to go like abusing other people. And so that was like, it was an effect of like sin and his choice, but still like the negative effects of like evil on the world. And so I don't know. And I like know that that's even kind of controversial, because a lot of people who like are in my circles of like people who have been like what I would say like more like severe, like as far as like rape or whatever. And like I would never say like God has a heart for that rapist, but I will say God has a heart for my abuser. Like, because I don't want to like claim that over someone else and make them feel that way. But I do know that God cares for murderers and rapists and abusers and all of it. And I think that he's just given me a heart to like, that's soft towards him. And I don't, once again, I'm not gonna like go get coffee with him, but like I feel way more empathy and compassion than I did like 2 years ago even.
Wow.
Yeah.